Good morning, good brother.
How goes it, my man?
It's going. It's going. We got over the loss last week, and start prepping for this week. And you're like, ooh, this could be a tough one too. So it's never easy in the league, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's the NFL.
Right.
It's hard to win. It's a week to week league, and you never know what's going to happen on any given Sunday or Monday or Thursday. But what you always know is that the Cowboys' opponent is going to play it like it's their Super Bowl. So
Every
Cowboys got to be
time.
ready every single week. Got to
Every
play. Got to be
time.
ready every single week, or otherwise, what happens is what just happened.
I feel like I don't know if it was us that talked about it or maybe me in the chat. I feel like we said this last week, right? Like the Saints are going to march in here and they're going to feel like, man, this is our stadium. Because I don't think it's a true home field from a crowd standpoint. It's just a comfortability thing for the Cowboys, in my opinion. Whereas when other opponents come into this stadium, it's like, oh, okay, this is prime time. Even if it's 12 o'clock or 3 o'clock, it's prime time to them, and they just play a level above. I don't know what it is.
Well, it's a couple things, and you touch on both of them. Number one, and I said this to a couple of folks in the building. I said this team doesn't play well at noon. For whatever reason, the team does not play well in noon games. Now, obviously, you could point at one of the reasons being that they rarely play in noon games, which is definitely true. But the fact is the fact. They have a slow start typically, and just slow production throughout the game if it's a noon game. But they got to be better than that because the other opponent doesn't care what time of day it is. They're coming in to handle some business. And the other thing, like you said, is when it comes to the Cowboys and home field advantage, obviously, as of the past couple of seasons, the last two games notwithstanding, they've been outstanding at AT&T Stadium. But when you're talking about Saints fans, you have to go back to, how so many of them were displaced by Katrina and came up to North Texas and it really just made a new home in North Texas, never really chose to go back to New Orleans. So when you think about it in that capacity, if you're wondering, hell, man, why are so many Saints fans at AT&T Stadium? It's because a good bit of them still live in Dallas. So like you said, it's not a true home game for the Cowboys, but nonetheless, whether it be a true home game or a semi-road game, whatever, you got to put better on film than what you did against them on Sunday because that was just an atrocity that cannot happen again.
Pat, it's been a very eventful week from a injury standpoint in Dallas. A lengthy injury report to say the least. But before you do attack the injury report for both sides, because there are some major ones over there in Baltimore too. The Jordan Phillips situation, that's the injury that's not on the injury report. I've only heard from Clarence Hill on Twitter where he kind of went to Jordan Phillips and Phillips spilled the beans and said, look, I'm fine. I don't know what's going on. What is going on here? I mean, we know. I think it's because of his play, but you don't normally see a player openly say that. We know teams do this, right? Hey, we're going to put you on IR. Right. But he openly came out and said, I'm fine. Could there be ramifications that happen to the Cowboys for this?
I mean, we'll see, because when you have a player coming out saying that, obviously the ears of the league are always out for things like that. You always have a potential investigation that could be launched, as far as injury report violations are concerned. But, I mean, I spoke with several people before and after, Clarence reported that Jordan said that. And everybody's telling me the same thing, is that his wrist. Now, it could be one of two things. I don't know what the truth is, because you have one side that's saying he has a wrist issue and you have the player saying he doesn't. But then at the same time, having been an athlete myself, I know that there are things that were hurting on me that I was still like, I'm fine, man. I'm fine. I can play. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if it's that situation where it's just like, no, there's something wrong here. But the player thinks that he can play through it, and he's frustrated that they won't allow him to play through it. So it could be that dynamic as well. So you kind of got to keep that in mind. But everything I'm being told is that, he has a wrist issue. Him saying my wrist is quote unquote fine. Is that a medical diagnosis from him, or is that an athlete, an NFL athlete saying, man, I can play and I'm pissed off that they're not letting me play? So, we'll see how that goes. But everyone's telling me that I've spoken with is that he really does actually have a wrist issue. Now, it doesn't help his case as far as the optics are concerned. It doesn't help his case that he had such a poor game in week 2, but at the same time, he wasn't the only one who did. And I don't see everybody else who had a poor game on IR. So, go figure.
What's going on with those who were injured or put on the injury report this past Thursday? This is one of the lengthier ones I've seen over the last few years for Dallas.
Yeah, it's lengthy, but when you get down to the nuts and bolts of it, it's not entirely concerning. I'll lead with the more concerning one, which is Mozzie Smith. Mozzie Smith left practice on Wednesday during the open portion, which was within the first 15 minutes, with head trainer Jim Maurer, and he did not return. He was DNP that day. He was DNP again yesterday with what's being described as back tightness. We spoke with Mike McCarthy both on the podium and off the podium. Off the podium, he gave a little bit more insight. He intimated that it's precautionary that he's being held out of practice. He was asked if, Mozzie's going to play on Sunday. What does the status look like? And the reply that he gave was really that it's precautionary. Now, will that hold up, come Sunday? We'll see. But obviously it's going to be a concern going into Sunday, given George Phillips is on IR. Yes, you want to, poach Carlos Watkins to bring him back to the fold from the Washington Commanders. But without Mozzie, at worst case, you're losing, or best case, you're losing depth if you don't have Mozzie on the field. And if he's on the field and he's dealing with back tightness, well, now you have your depth, but what does the production look like? What does the ability look like? So, you have a defensive tackle question mark going in. So that's the concerning one.
Real quick, before you move forward, is there any whispers that they'll call up? I believe, is it Haskins on the practice squad or the rookie Denzel Daxon?
Daxon.
Yeah.
It's possible. It is possible. I don't know that they're in those conversations just yet. I think that today and tomorrow morning most certainly will spark those conversations. So if Mozzie Smith doesn't practice today at all, and or if he is not making progress with that back tightness, then I could absolutely see one of those guys, I'm not going to say a couple, but one of those guys probably being elevated from the practice squad on Saturday, because those happen around Saturday at noon time. So keep an eye on that. That's a great question. Positive side of the injury equation, Fergalicious. Jake Ferguson has returned to practice effective on Wednesday, albeit in a limited capacity, but he's moving well. He does have the knee brace on, but the knee brace is just precautionary for stability purposes. Mild MCL sprain. He describes that it's barely registered as a grade 1. He has no pain. He was close to playing against the Saints. All things point to him being a go against the Ravens as long as there are no setbacks. Trevon Diggs and CeeDee Lamb set out on Wednesday with a foot and an ankle injury, respectively. I reported at the time there was no concern there. We spoke to McCarthy. We spoke to CeeDee Lamb yesterday. I observed Trevon Diggs very closely. They are good to go for Sunday against the Ravens. Obviously, that's going to be huge. John Stevens Jr., we talk about depth. Okay, well, you're running a little bit slim on defensive tackle. Well, your tight end room is getting a bit thicker, okay, because Jake Ferguson is likely coming back, and John Stevens Jr. is trending toward a debut after missing the first 2 games with the hamstring injury. A lot of other players came back from rest. Jalen Brooks, that's one to keep an eye on. He popped up on the injury report yesterday. He was limited with an ankle injury. We'll see how he can practice today and tomorrow morning. Makes me wonder if he can't go, or if he will be less than 100%. Maybe it's the Ryan Flanoy legacy game. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. And then for the most part, Tyrus Wheat, he was back from a personal issue, not injury related. So for the most part, keep an eye on Mozzie Smith, that defensive tackle situation, and Jalen Brooks. Maybe it's a Ryan Flanoy afternoon on Sunday. But for the most part, it's positive news.
Let me jump to Sunday real quick, because you brought up the tight ends. The room could get thicker again here. Pause if necessary. Jake Ferguson coming back with possibly Stevenson. This couldn't be a better week, in my opinion, because the Ravens have struggled with these tight ends. So
yes, they do.
Okay, that's something that you've picked up here, and something, in my opinion, I think we should be watching for. But what are some other things for you in this Cowboys-Ravens game that you're watching and looking out for?
Well, that's going to be one of the keys, is how effectively can you use the tight ends, especially Jake Ferguson, because few people know Roquan Smith like I know Roquan Smith, go Dogs, with the exception of this weekend. I hate that this had to be you, bro. What I would suggest doing is using your tight ends, especially Jake, force Roquan Smith to carry Jake Ferguson. up the seams and inside and out, quick out routes and things like that. You need to clear Roquan out of the middle of the field. If you do that, then that is a gaping freaking hole. If you allow him to operate carte blanche in the middle of that field, you are going to have a bad and a very long day. He is that good. So delete him by using the productivity and the threat of Jake Ferguson, John Stevens Jr., and maybe even Luke Schoonmaker. He did show some things last week. He had a career game last week. When we say career game, not saying it was 200 yards, but it was literally a career game for him. 6 catches on 6 targets. He showed some things.
Right.
That's one thing. Another thing is we talk about this, Will, time and time again. Adapt your game plan to the opponent. This is not the week whatsoever to try to run the ball, okay? I know that Cowboys fans want to see the run get established. I hear you. I'm with you. Last week was the week to do it. The week before was the week to do it. This ain't the week to do it, okay, for 2 reasons. One, the Ravens' defense, their run defense, is allowing less than 50 yards per game. 50 yards per game is insanity, okay? Obviously ranked number 1 in the league in that aspect. However, what does their pass defense look like? 32nd in the league in pass defense. The blueprint is right there in front of you. You want to get your passing offense on track, this is the week to do it. I say go out there and hand it off only as necessary, just to say, hey, we did it. Right.
Simplifying and taking out.
By all means, let Dak Prescott throw that thing 179 times. I don't care. Even if it results in a pick or 2, you could probably get 4 touchdowns in the air to maybe 1 interception. You got to keep attacking the secondary, because while they are physical, they do not cover well. So that's got to be the game plan. Using Jake Ferguson to clear out Roquan Smith, attack the middle of the field, and then get downfield with CeeDee Lamb, get Brandon Cooks involved again, and look for a guy like Kevontae Turpin. Put some speed on that and stretch. You'll force those more physical but slower corners to cover downfield will be my plan of attack. Defensively, I said this on Talking Cowboys, and I'll reiterate it here when I go in about 5 minutes. Spy with DeMarvion Overshown and get Micah Parsons applying pressure in the interior, not on the edge, not in this game. What my goal would be is to, number one, Derrick Henry is not Alvin Kamara in that he's not going to burn you on the edges and in space and with the quick bubbles and screens and things like that. It's A gap, B gap. Okay, if you let Derrick Henry pummel you on the interior, you're going to have a bad day with Lamar Jackson after that. So send Micah Parsons up the middle. I'm talking zero tech. I'm talking, 1 eye, 2 eye variations of that. That will immediately implode the front of the pocket. That forces 2 things to happen. Derrick Henry now has to redirect. If you can redirect him, his momentum gets broken up. It makes it easier for a guy like DeMarcus Lawrence, Marshawn Nealon, and maybe a linebacker to come in on the edge and take him down before he gets momentum established. Number 2, it forces Lamar Jackson out to the edges. And now you have DeMarvion Overshown spying him, hopefully, and he has the speed and the burst to be able to attack those edges left and right and contain Lamar Jackson. You do that, now you're forcing Lamar Jackson to throw the ball, and that's what you want. That's what you want. And then once he starts throwing the ball, you keep a lid on Zay as opposed to 2 speedsters. They only have 1, okay? And they run a lot of 12 personnel with 2 tight ends because Likely and Andrews, they can be a problem. So what I would do is I would make this a Wanye and a Marquise Bell type day to combat that 12 personnel, right? And that would be my plan of attack for both sides of the ball. I feel like if they do that and they execute, can I say that one more time? Execute, then you can definitely leave this game with a win. Will it be a blowout? No, this is going to be a battle, I believe. But you can definitely take this as maybe a 10-point win if you execute.
Hey, Pat, appreciate that science you just dropped here, Cowboys Nation. Make sure you check them out later today after our show, of course. Go check them out on .com with Talking Cowboys. Enjoy your weekend, bro.
Yes, sir. Talk to you soon.